Let us pray. O Lord, we give thanks for the bounty of our province, our land, our resources, and our people. We pledge ourselves to act as good stewards on behalf of all Albertans. Amen. Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. The honorable member for Calgary Northwest.
Back up to presenting petitions for a moment.
Unanimous consent to revert to the presentation of petitions. Opposed? Opposed. The honorable member for Calgary Northwest. I have a number of petitions again from teachers asking the government to give favorable consideration to Resolution
226-91 adopted on September 28, 1991. One of them is from substitute teachers from the Calgary Public School Board that teach in a variety of constituencies and schools. Mr. Speaker, as well, there are 27 teachers there as well. There are 5 schools that also signed petitions. A total of 216 teachers, Mr. Speaker, including amongst them the Premier's former daughter-in-law.
Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
The honorable member for Rocky Mountain House.
I request leave to introduce a bill number 299, being the Surface Rights Amendment Act. Mr. Speaker, this amendment, when passed,
Will preclude judicial review of awards made by the Surface Rights Board except for lack
of jurisdiction.
The honorable member for Rocky Mountain House has moved first reading of bill number 299, the Surface Rights Amendment Act. Does the Assembly agree with this motion for first reading? Opposed? Carried.
Bill number 299, Surface Rights Amendment Act, introduced by the honourable member, Mr. Lund, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
The honorable government House Leader.
It's my pleasure to table the 1991 annual report of the Alberta Research Council.
The honorable Minister of the Environment.
Speaker, I'd like to table the 1989-1990 annual report for the department.
The honorable member for Vegreville. Speaker, I'd like to file with the Assembly copies of petitions signed by 57 teachers in the Vegreville constituency urging support for Resolution 226-91. Introduction of special guests. The honorable member for Edmonton Wellwoods. Pleased to introduce to you and the members of the Assembly this afternoon a very special guest, Reverend Joseph Jacob of the Mortimer Church of India.
Reverend Jacob is in Canada on a 4-year posting serving the members of the church congregations in Calgary, Edmonton, and Fort McMurray, and he's accompanied today by Mr. Isaac Thomas. I'd ask the two of them to stand in the gallery
and receive a very warm welcome. The Minister of Energy. Very much, Mr. Speaker.
For the second day this week, Mr. Speaker, we are blessed with students from Dr. Egbert Community School in our constituency. I'm very pleased to see the high interest in the workings of government.
From Calgary Montrose, there are 84 visitors, Mr. Speaker, and they're joined by teachers and group leaders, Mr. Leon, Mr. Jack, Mr. Welland, Ms. Langridge, and Ms. Vandergoop.
I'd like the students and the guests to please stand and be recognized by the Assembly.
Honorable Minister of Family and Social Services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Recently I had the opportunity of visiting St. Elizabeth Seton School in the constituency
of Red Deer South, and today I have students from that school visiting us in the Legislative Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I know at times it seems that we're seeing double in this assembly. And today some of the members opposite might even think that they're seeing triple. But Mr. Speaker, they aren't seeing triple, they are seeing triplets. Colin and David and Stephen Pickle are here today, Mr. Speaker. They are accompanied by 26 of their classmates, as well as their principal, Mr. Mel Eklund, and their teacher, Kathy Jabush. They are seated in the public gallery, and I would ask them all to rise and receive the warm reception of this assembly. Ministerial statements. Oral question period. Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, we have a government that pretended there would be a balanced budget last year. We have a government that's wasted $1.3 billion in failed companies while Albertans were losing their jobs and the Premier was denying there was a recession in Alberta. Mr. Speaker, we have a government that never tells Albertans the truth about the financial state of the province's finances. My question, Mr. Speaker, to the Treasurer is simply this. Will the Treasurer now break with the tradition of misleading Albertans and tell this Assembly how big the deficit in his balanced budget really is?
Mr. Speaker, I know the member from Norwood is dancing around his choice of words, but let me make it very clear to Albertans that we are not at all misleading them about the facts and the
strength of this economy in Alberta. We'll compare this Alberta economy on a broad base against any province in Canada. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, this government has done an awful lot to ensure
that on the fiscal side, we are maintaining a very conservative point of view as to the tax levels, the expenditure levels, and ensuring that we get on with making this province one of the best in Canada. That's what we're doing, Mr. Speaker.
Huffing and puffing won't blow the deficit away. And then I asked the Treasurer, he was talking to the media, and I want to ask him again, because it's a very serious matter. How much deficit do we have from the last budget year? Tell us in this Assembly. Mr. Speaker, the member for Norwood knows full well that the process of this Assembly and other assemblies, in fact, provides for the information to be disclosed when the budget is brought down. When we bring the budget down, Mr. Speaker, we'll do just that, provide very comprehensive information, provide a wide range of opportunities to debate the pros and cons of the fiscal plan historically presented and in the future presented for the 92-93 fiscal year, and go through a line-by-line review of the estimates of all departments. And in that discussion, Mr. Speaker, the member can make his points. Mr. Speaker, we should have had the budget a long time ago. That's the point. We don't even know when it's coming, Mr. Speaker. And I want to ask the Treasurer this. Simply, would he confirm that the budget deficit is close to a $2 billion figure, maybe even higher, Mr. Speaker, and they don't know what political spin to put on it, Mr. Speaker. That's why we don't have a budget. Well, Mr. Speaker, the time of the government is always well thought through. We're roughly
on a position to bring the budget in the next few days of April. I should remind the member that the fiscal year of the province ended just yesterday. The government has presented an interim supply bill,
which clearly the member debated and understood that this would allow us to make the bills, make the payments on expenditures of the government through the 4-month period ahead when the budget will be debated. And in due course, we'll be presenting that. Mr. Speaker, to make the kinds of forecasts the member has. But the size of the current year deficit is not, in fact, responsible, and he should, in all fairness, and I know fairness is a difficult test for a member, he should wait and see what happens when the budget's brought down, rather than confusing and misleading Albertans. We should have had the budget by now, Mr. Speaker. That's what the point is. Now, Mr. Speaker, my second slide is back to the same Treasurer. Mr. Speaker, the Treasurer's finally acknowledged that there's some debt this year will be higher. But let's go back to 1990-91, the deficit from the previous year, Mr. Speaker. We have to rely on public accounts for that, but we don't have the public accounts, Mr. Speaker. What a way to run a $12.5 billion enterprise, Mr. Speaker. And he likes to talk about the private sector. A treasurer in the private sector who acted this way would have been fired a long time ago, Mr. Speaker. Now my question to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer finally tell us why he cannot get the public accounts to Albertans on time? Mr. Speaker, the public accounts will be presented again in the next few days. They're in the hands of the printers. There will be a reasonable explanation, Mr. Speaker, when I present the public accounts to the people of Alberta, because in it we are responding to some of the requests presented by the Auditor General, and the members across the way will have made comments about the suggestions. We've had a long discussion with the Auditor General, and we'll be presenting those. But the people of Alberta know, and this Legislative Assembly is well aware, that public accounts will be meeting for the next 4 or 5 months. There will be ample opportunity again on that side to have a clear look at the expenditures of the government. And as in past years, the Public Accounts Committee will start to work. The member can appear there and ask questions of all ministers. We're prepared to bring deputy ministers and provide additional information, Mr. Speaker. The amount of information is provided through public accounts.
The disclosure of this government is not matched anywhere in Canada.
Mr. We have a financial crisis. We got the Treasurer talking and talking and not giving us the answers, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's go back to the Auditor General, and I ask the Treasurer simply this. Isn't it true that the Auditor General usually signs the financial statements in October, but this year refused to sign them until March because of the way Treasury officials presented the financial statements? Mr. Speaker, the member has answered his own question. The Auditor General signed the financial statements in March. It's now just a day or two past the end of March. It seems reasonable to me, given the size of the printing and the stacks of the public accounts are high, the complexities are there, that in fact that time is reasonable. And second, Mr. Speaker, as I have clearly pointed out, on a reasonable discussion with the Auditor General, listening to the kinds of important comments he has made, we have had a long series of discussions with him about the certain adjustments which we'll be making, which I'll be prepared to discuss and disclose once those public accounts are available. You can call upon the Auditor General to discuss them. I'll be available to discuss them, Mr. Speaker. It's going to be an interesting time ahead when, in fact, the member from Norwood finds out what's happened, because just have to be patient for a week or so. We've been too patient with this government, Mr. Speaker. We're expecting to get the financial house in order, but it never happens. But, Mr. Speaker, the reality is the Auditor General usually signs in October. They didn't sign till March. And I want to ask the Treasurer simply this, and give us the truth, Mr. Speaker. Isn't the real reason that the public accounts are delayed is because the Auditor General was unwilling to sign them off until the Treasurer backed off his attempt to downplay the deficit in the General Revenue Fund? Nothing to be further from the truth, Mr. Speaker. Nothing to be further from the truth. But what we can say is this, that the government and the Auditor General and the members of the Assembly have been discussing, and they have made remarks in the question period about recognition of certain losses triggered by own guarantees, Mr. Speaker. And as a result of that, we are simply accommodating the Auditor General in part by reviewing the way in which we disclose these losses and recognize these losses. Accordingly, we've had long discussions with the Auditor General and his people by the Audit Committee of the Province of Alberta, Mr. Speaker, an independent audit group of external evaluators who have been involved in this, Mr. Speaker. And as a consequence, the statements were signed in March. As the member notes, it's now just a couple of days into April, and that's a reasonable time for the publication of the public accounts. A member for Glengarry, leader of the Liberal Party. Speaker, a recent financial statement issued by Dominion Bond Rating Services states that Alberta has had a 340% increase in debt, per capita debt, from the time that the provincial treasurer took over his responsibility as treasurer of this province to the end of 1991. How can the provincial treasurer with a straight face tell Albertans not to worry about this huge debt? Mr. Speaker, on the weekend I went to see the sequel to the movie Clones. It was the same movie, Mr. Speaker. And here we have the same question being asked a member from Norwood. He's a member from Glengarry. He simply asked the same question, which we have responded to time and time again. And he makes the record very clear again, Mr. Speaker. Fortunately in Alberta, we have had an opportunity over the past 5 or 6 years to work through one of the more difficult times which Alberta has faced, and the price of oil collapsed suddenly from under us in 1986. And in fact, we presented a plan to Albertans whereby we did not unload the cost of oil price changes onto the tax system they pay. We took a measured and careful approach to the way in which we smoothed our transition from a very large deficit, Mr. Speaker, to a balanced budget last year presented in this Assembly. And we did it by controlling those areas within our own control, that is the expenditures.
We manage the expenditures. We control them better than any government in Canada, and at the same time, Mr. Speaker, provided the economic environment for investment, diversification, and new jobs. And that happened, Mr. Speaker. And that's why the whiners and criers across the way don't like it. Because we use a reasonable approach. We convinced the people of Alberta it was the right way to go. We have the lowest taxes in Canada right here in Alberta. And our economy and any other measurements you want to make against any other province in Canada is the best there is. It's working, Mr. Speaker. I understand the resentment of a member across the way, but it's been an effective opportunity. Now, here are the facts. We have, Mr. Speaker, the highest retail sales per capita of any province in Canada. We have the largest gross domestic product per capita of any province in Canada. We have the highest investment levels per capita of any province in Canada. Mr. Speaker, we have the highest exports per capita of any province in Canada. That's performance, Mr. Speaker, and that's what the people of Alberta want. Tick, 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 tick. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the provincial treasurer attempted to hoodwink Albertans into believing that we had, in terms of debt, one of the lowest debts in Canada. This recent report says that we're the 5th highest in Canada. Why does the treasurer continue to try to distort the real facts on the debt? Now, Mr. Speaker, the distortion is only in the minds of that member, Mr. Speaker, and he is the one who's causing confusions. I said in the House yesterday, the general revenue fund and capital fund debt of this province is approximately $10.7 billion, Mr. Speaker. And let me say clearly, Mr. Speaker, that BC and Alberta have the best debt per GDP ratio of any province in Canada, running about 14 to 15%. Now that's in comparison to other provinces, as I said yesterday, such as Manitoba. For the total provincial debt of some of those provinces, Newfoundland, Manitoba in particular, is running close to 50% of gross domestic product in debt form. We have one of the best records there, Mr. Speaker. And secondly, our provincial general revenue fund commitment to debt retirement is one of the lowest in Canada as well. Now that's the reasoned position we have taken, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we have said to Albertans. Let's be careful about the way in which we handle our debt. We don't like debt any more than anyone else does, Mr. Speaker, but we have to define what it is. Now the member from Glengarry is including off-balance sheet debt in that calculation, including, for example, and I've had this discussion with the Dominion Bond Rating System, debt in the Alberta Municipal Finance Corporation, which is debt which we have provided to the municipalities, Mr. Speaker. It's not the provincial government's debt. It's not only taxpayers of Alberta. Alberta's back to pay that debt, Mr. Speaker. The debt of the province of Alberta is about $10 to $11 billion. One of the best in Canada, Mr. Speaker, and we're the only government that I know of that's able to manage it effectively and would buy it down, Mr. Speaker, retire the deficit, and that's what we're going to do. Speaker, yesterday I asked, but yet again, for the provincial treasurer to give us the specifics, the details of his plan to pay down this huge Alberta debt. The question was sidestepped, like it always is. I asked, but yet again, what are the details, what are the specifics of the treasurer's plan to pay down the huge Alberta debt? What are the details? Mr. Speaker, Albertans know full well that they can't trust any Liberal Party to manage a national or provincial economy. And certainly this member from Glengarry has no ability to even understand the size of the problems, and it would be unfair to leave the impression that he knows what he's talking about, because he doesn't. Let me make it very clear what we have said to the people of Alberta. The first thing we must do as a government is to ensure that the economy is strong, that it supports the kind of private sector investment that's important, and we have meaningful jobs generated in this province. As I mentioned earlier to you, Mr. Speaker, and to the members of this Assembly, most of those have been accomplished in this province. We still have a lot of work to do. All members of this government are working hard to achieve that end of a broader, diversified economy with meaningful jobs, and most of the record is clear. The second phase of our plan, Mr. Speaker, would be, as I've said before, as many of our government has said before, that we would then get on with buying down the debt. Now, we have controlled our expenditures. We have a very good base of economic expansion. We have the lowest taxes of any government in Canada. But we do have a resource revenue problem, Mr. Speaker, and that's the only... Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I realize that it's springtime. I can hear all the little animals croaking in the water. Mr. Speaker, I'm thrilled
to rise today to congratulate this government for another successfully negotiated land claim settlement, the Girard land claim. And in so doing, I would like to ask the Minister responsible for Native Affairs to outline the terms of the settlement made possible through our true leadership of our Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to advise the Assembly that approximately 2 months ago we did conclude, together with the federal government, the Girard land claim, which arises from the Treaty of 1899, when the Girard band did not in fact receive their full entitlement. Through negotiations with the federal government and the provincial government, they have now received their full entitlement, which amounted to 2,600 acres in this final settlement, $3 million in cash, being $2 million by the Canadian government, $1 million by our own government. And I think the most important part of the overall settlement, Mr. Speaker, would be the fact that the Girard band has now signed off completely as having received their full entitlement in accordance with the 1899 treaty.
Mr. Speaker, although many governments like the NDP and BC made campaign promises supporting Aboriginal title and settlement of Indian land claims, their inaction, Mr. Speaker, shows a true lack of intestinal fortitude in dealing with native land claims. Mr. Speaker, no other government in Canada compares to Alberta's commitment to resolve these long-standing issues. However, we still have a lot of work ahead of us, and not to let the minister off the hook. Could he please indicate the numbers of outstanding land claims left in Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, anybody in British Columbia that speaks of giving our Aboriginal First Nation people all of the land in which they claim Aboriginal title, I have great sympathy for, because at one time that claim amounted to about 125% of British Columbia. Of the Alberta government, how big government they got there now? I think the Aboriginal title is now claimed over 70%, so of course that's an absolute impossibility. It doesn't matter what government or what party said it. In Alberta since 1986, we have settled 6 claims. There are 4 now outstanding, and that we are at various stages, those being Tawkee, Janvier, Rubicon, and Alexis, and there are 2 in the pre-negotiation stage. So at this particular time, there are 6 claims being worked on insofar as land entitlement is concerned. Very good. Now we'll remember the Calgary Mountain Deal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our provincial treasurer yesterday gave us another example of how this government mismanages money. Over $44 million went down the drain to cover a deficit in the land purchase fund. To put that in some context, Mr. Speaker, $44 million this year would help put 1,000 students through university, or it would solve the equity funding problems of our school boards. It would fund a great portion of the budget of the Alberta Children's Hospital, just to give a few examples. Will the provincial treasurer confirm, Mr. Speaker, that his so-called balanced budget went $44 million deeper in debt to pay for this expense in the land fund, rather than to use $44 million to lower taxes or to pay for needed essential services? And Mr. Speaker, the member only shows how little he knows about the operations of the financial structure of this government, in that any payments to or from the land purchase fund do not in fact affect program expenditures and certainly don't affect the deficit. Mr. Speaker, the provincial treasurer knew, or he ought to have known about this problem when he brought down his budget in this assembly last year. Why did the provincial treasurer deliberately underestimate this expenditure by not including it in the budget at that time? Was he trying to misrepresent Alberta's true financial situation in order to pretend there's a balanced budget? Mr. Speaker, the member should simply know that transfers to certain funds
and certain other kinds of appropriations do not affect
the expenditures that are voted by this legislative assembly.
This is a transfer to a fund which is essentially a fund which continues to have its life and operations through the financial year ends of the government, in which case we can hold assets and sell assets. Now, the member tends to forget, Mr. Speaker, that we also transferred out of other funds over $30 million in the past year from surpluses which have been generated in other funds, and those dollars essentially are balanced off over the course of the year. So on one hand, we may have to make some transfers to certain funds to allow development to take place in certain assets. On the other hand, the funds transfer money to us. But these do not affect the deficit, Mr. Speaker. They do not affect the expenditures, Mr. Speaker, and they were not at all reported to the House because, of course, the House does not deal with them. They deal only with the program expenditures of the government. Amendment for Edmonton Meadowlark. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday in the House, the provincial treasurer assured all of us that the provincial debt was about $10 or $11 billion. Later, outside the House, he specified the provincial debt by picking yet another figure out of the air at about $13 billion. He doesn't need a calculator to keep up with his debt, Mr. Speaker. He needs an escalator. My first question is to the provincial treasurer. Will the provincial treasurer please tell us which of these provincial debt figures Albertans are supposed to believe? Well, I must say the member from Meadowlark has improved over his leader's position. He at least recognizes the debt is only about $10 to $11 billion, and he's right. Mr. Speaker, in the face of this spiraling debt, why does the treasurer continue to ignore essential fiscal reforms like value for money efficiency audits, sunset clauses in government programs, pay-as-you-go capital funding, and enhanced legislature scrutiny of the estimates process? Mr. Speaker, let me just recite what happens in terms of the voting of dollars that the people of Alberta allow the government to spend. We have a very long process, Mr. Speaker, whereby the budget is presented to the Legislative Assembly, and over that period, the legislature itself scrutinizes, to use the member's words, all the expenditures of every department. Every element of government expenditures are scrutinized, are debated, are analyzed, and ministers are here to provide information as to how it operates. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we have now one of the most extensive and wide-ranging question periods, usually raised by the opposition, but nonetheless available to the opposition, whereby questions of this order can be presented and reasonable explanations given. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we have the Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Speaker, which all the expenditures of government are examined. And more fully, Mr. Speaker, we have a long 12-day period, 10-day period, whereby we debate the Heritage Safety Trust Fund investments. So, Mr. Speaker, all of these items are put in place to allow the opposition, even with their questionable abilities, to deal with these questions, Mr. Speaker. So there is
Full evaluation of the government expenditures.
Honorable member for Red North. Speaker, first let me congratulate you on the good job you're doing as Deputy Speaker today, especially
in the face of all the disorder being brought into the House by the opposition. My question is to the Deputy Premier, in light of some comments made by the Prime Minister.
He's talking about the possibility of a referendum to deal with constitutional issues.
Our Deputy Premier has gone on record seeming to be in opposition to that. Yet here in the Assembly, our government under the Premier has tabled our first Bill number 1, being a bill which supports the principle of referenda. Could the Deputy Premier please clarify his position on this?
Mr. Speaker, I did indicate concern about the utilization of a national referendum
As advanced in the way it was apparently done.
in that it was suggested that by calling a national referendum, it would by itself deal with the constitutional changes
that may be proposed by the
federal government. And I made it very clear that there's only
one way laid out in the Constitution of this
country to effect constitutional change, and that is by the parliaments of this country passing through those parliaments appropriate resolutions. And the introduction of a national referendum would in itself have no legal effect. And I emphasize that again. That is not, however, to say that we do not intend to respect the wishes of Albertans. And we have made it clear that before any such resolution is passed through this Assembly again, the people of Alberta will be given the opportunity through a referendum of expressing their views on that particular topic. I did also point out again, the member for Jasper Place will have his turn, no doubt, in the question period, but if he wishes to keep on interrupting, he can do so. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that the Referendum Act that is proposed by this Assembly is quite different than the one which is being suggested as a possibility, although we haven't seen any legislation at the federal level yet. But we know this, that any national referendum has the potential of splitting the country between different provinces. And I just remind members of the Assembly how Albertans might react in a referendum which did not include an appropriately revised and reformed Senate. If Albertans were to have that type of ineffective body forced down their throats, would any member in this Assembly be prepared to accept that? I would hope not.
Well, that helps to clarify the position a bit, Mr. Speaker, but it does beg the question and leaves me wondering if the minister then is actually prepared to let Quebec be setting the agenda here.
Mr. Speaker, as usual, the member for Westlock Sturgeon makes light of serious issues in his comments, but I shall try and answer the question over the din from the Liberal benches. I would say this clearly, the establishment of the national agenda clearly must be done in cooperation and consultation by the governments of this country, federal, provincial, territorial, and now, because of the Aboriginal issues under discussion, by Aboriginal groups. To work to a timetable, to work to one which is arbitrarily established, either by one province or by the federal government, is creating, in my view, a situation which could lead to decisions made in haste and unwisely. We will cooperate in the consultative process now underway. We will work actively to advance the proposals set out in the Select Special Committee report. But I want, Mr. Speaker, to make it absolutely clear that we do not want to have an artificially imposed deadline or agenda set for us by any other province or by the federal government. The people of Alberta have told us they want their say in the process, and we will ensure that that occurs.
Good answer.
For Calgary Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are hundreds of northern Albertans who are not getting adequate medical services. In January, the Athabasca Health Unit stopped the dispensing of medications to people in the Peerless and Trout Lakes area. As well, because most of these people have not been granted band status, Health and Welfare Canada refuses to provide direct health services. My question is to the Minister of Health. Is she aware of this problem, and if so, what is she doing about it?
Mr. Speaker, I am aware of the unilateral decision that was made by the federal government and was made aware of it by one of the physicians in the town of Slave Lake who called the Department of Health to advise them of this decision by the federal government and follow up by the MLA for Slave Lake and her concern that's been expressed as well. I share the concern of the honourable member that these kinds of unilateral decisions by the federal government can have very serious impacts on access to health services. I have signed a letter to the federal minister following up on several discussions we've had with the National Department of Health and Welfare, hopefully to find a resolution to the issue.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Here are some of the issues. Due to the lack of qualified medical personnel in the area, unauthorized people are providing emergency medical aid. Costly air services are increasingly used, and even then, patients may wait up to a week for prescribed medication. So my question is to the minister, I know that these discussions are going on with her federal counterpart, but will she ensure that these services continue to be provided until these jurisdictional battles are settled?
word.
Mr. Speaker, we have not cut off the funding of physicians who bill the Alberta Health Plan who were traveling in at federal government expense. I'm not willing to just simply sit by, particularly with what we have been enduring in this province from established program finance changes that the federal government has effected. Certainly not prepared to say that we will pick up everything that they have decided not to do. Rather, what we are doing is working through them, showing the value of this service, showing the people who are being served. We will certainly not stop paying physicians who are in fact traveling into the community. The problem is they're not having their travel paid for by the federal government. And I'm not prepared to back down in terms of getting the efforts of the federal government back on the plan that they had in place.
Member for Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, the regulations of the pending Ambulance Act have generated some very disturbing comments from all of the major players involved in pre-hospital care. This will seriously affect quality of care and ultimately patient safety. My questions are to the Minister of Health. Will the Minister stop watering down the regulations and ensure that there will be consistent medical input and direction into pre-hospital care?
Good question.
Mr. Speaker, I don't understand quite what the member means by watering down the regulations. The Ambulance Services Act received royal assent in this Assembly in June of 1990. We have been doing a major consultation on the regulations throughout the province. In fact, we've held meetings in 60 communities in Alberta to look at those regulations. I'm not sure what she means by watering down. Certainly, I am even more committed today to the need for the Ambulance Service Act and the regulations than I was back in 1990. But I don't believe it's appropriate to proclaim the Act until we've ensured appropriate consultation has occurred.
Mr. Speaker, there's no point in consultation if we're not going to pay any attention to what the major involved people are saying. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, before the Act goes any further, will the Minister immediately make the draft regulations public to those major involved players? Tell us before it's too late, Madam Minister, why should we be secretive about the emergency care of Albertans?
You're here.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I indicated, the regulations have been out on a very broad stakeholder consultation. If the honourable member has some people who feel that they have not been included in that stakeholder participation, perhaps she'd like to alert me to who they are. It's not a matter of keeping regulations quiet until they're passed. It's a matter of probably one of the most massive consultations we've done on regulations. But if she has someone who feels they have not been consulted with respect to the regulations, perhaps she'd like to let me know, and I would be happy to follow up on it.
For Calgary Fish Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent months, a number of constituents have raised concerns with me regarding departmental jurisdiction over public lands in our province. These concerns have resulted from public speculation that this crucial responsibility might possibly transfer from the Department of Forestry, Lands and Wildlife to the Department of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, given that Forestry, Lands and Wildlife manages these Crown or public lands with the multiple use concept as their mandate, can the Minister clarify the government's intentions?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I've answered before in the House, that it is not so much a question of where the administration of public lands is, but it revolves more around the question of a number of issues. Examples would be access trespass issues. And Mr. Speaker, we are working, by we, I mean the group of ministers involved, are working to come to some resolution on that issue.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the constituents to whom I referred, I think, would be encouraged by the indication that there is a ministerial task force at work. They would be further encouraged to know how long these deliberations are going to take. When will we hear the results of this task force's work?
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the honourable member for Fish Creek's representation, and I would say we would expedite it as quickly as possible. But before, if there were any major decisions made, before they were ratified, there certainly would be public consultation if any transfer were to take place.
For Edmonton Avonmore.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my questions are to the Minister for Family and Social Services. The problem of juvenile prostitution has been drawn to our attention by task force in both Calgary and Edmonton. Mr. Speaker, the Child Welfare Act directs that a child, any person under the age of 18, who is at risk of emotional, physical, or sexual harm is a child in need of protection by the minister. My question to the minister, will the minister now commit to intervening on behalf of these children through apprehension, provision of support and treatment services, education opportunities, and through charging customers of child and adolescent prostitutes with child abuse?
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the concern that the member has brought forward, and certainly I share her concern. As it relates to the reference to whether charges should be laid or not laid, it's certainly not within my parameters to make that decision. However, Mr. Speaker, if it can be shown that there are children that are legitimately at risk, by all means, our department will step in and make all the resources that we have available to them, Mr. Speaker. I should note that we are working with the mayors of Calgary and Edmonton as it relates to some of the recommendations that they've brought forward. Those recommendations involve not only the provincial government, but also the municipal government and the community itself, Mr. Speaker, and I would draw to the members' attention that there are some good community supports that are also available to children that find themselves in that position.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that any child who is forced to earn a living through prostitution is a child at risk.
Right on.
My second question is to the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, the Criminal Code of Canada holds that a child under the age of 14 cannot be deemed to give consent to sexual activity. Will the Attorney General now commit to consulting with the Solicitor General with a view to encouraging police and Crown prosecutors to lay criminal charges of child abuse or sexual assault against customers of juvenile prostitutes, as is done in the case of wife battering?
Mr. Speaker, certainly take that forward and see what we can do. It's a good idea.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
My questions are for the Attorney General. Recent court decisions have clearly demonstrated that it's not only delay after charges are laid, but also pre-charge delay, which can give rise to motions for stay of proceedings on the basis of excessive delay. My question relates to the principal affair. It's been some 8 years since the first problem surfaced with that company in 1984. In 1985, the Security Commission recommendation to shut it down was ignored. In 1987, the company collapsed. In 1988, the Code Commission was appointed. In 1989, it reported. And we still haven't heard back with respect to the recommendations of the Code Commission that charges should be laid. How much longer will Albertans have to wait until they know whether charges are going to be laid in this matter?
Mr. Speaker, the chronology of the events with principal are indeed accurate, and it has been some time since the Code inquiry was tabled with their recommendations. The RCMP had a team of investigators monitoring the inquiry all the way through, have received that information, and have a team that varies from 4 to 5 officers that are going through that information. The honourable member, being a member of the Law Society, realizes that you must not only think you have evidence, you must make sure that the evidence is of the kind and with enough materiality to it that you will in fact get a conviction when you lay the charges, and that's what the justice system is about. The RCMP concur that they are in fact working with due diligence to ensure that we will get our report. A timeline I cannot give you.
Is it insufficiency of evidence or lack of determination and political willpower? Mr. Speaker, the pattern seems to the pattern seems to be repeating itself with respect to the Aryan Nations affair. The Aryan Nations affair, again, we have a lengthy delay. We have an expensive public inquiry. We have an investigation that recommends the laying of criminal charges, and again, we have silence and delay. When will we know whether charges are going to be laid in the Aryan Nations matter?
Mr. Speaker, I'm quite surprised at the honourable member trying to grandstand on a couple of very, very serious issues. The matter of the Aryan Nations was investigated by the police. The evidence was analyzed by the Attorney General's Department, and in fact there was not evidence sufficient to lay charges. There was then an inquiry held, quite full and complete, and they said that they thought that perhaps if we looked at the information again, we might find some charges. We're willing to do that. We've got a special prosecution unit that is analyzing that material. First, the honourable member wants us to quickly go and lay the charges, and he's the first to stand up and say if we do that we're unjustly charging someone. Justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done, and is in this fact.
Charles Ng, the honourable member for Edmonton-Whitemud.
Speaker, on Tuesday, the minister responsible for workers' compensation admitted that taping telephone calls of injured workers had been occurring within the board. My question, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, as head of this government, will the Premier give assurances to this House that the practice of taping telephone calls is not occurring in any other government ministry or government agency?
Mr. Speaker, I thought the Honourable Minister dealt with the matter very adequately with the Honourable Member. He pointed out that this only happened with the agreement of the caller. It seems to me if you have a request made, the caller agrees with it, that there's certainly nothing wrong with doing it. And why the Honourable Member would complain about that, I don't know.
Mr. Speaker, again to the Premier. Will the Premier commit to investigate all government ministries and agencies to ensure that the taping of telephone calls is not occurring?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would certainly say this, that it certainly would never be done without the approval of the person who is on the other end of the call. I would hope, Mr. Speaker, there'd be no members of this Assembly or the government who would either support or attempt such a thing.
I have a member for Porno-Corimby.
Speaker, the Minister of Health has recently released a policy paper on directions for mental health services, which includes emphasis on community care and child care. However, Mr. Speaker, one area of great need is that of delivery and coordination of these services to children in schools, and the paper is not very specific on this point. I wish to ask the Minister if the implementation of this policy will involve providing adequate assistance to schools and school programs dealing with special needs students.
Mr. Speaker, I think that the issue of mental health and the mental health of Albertans is larger than just the school programs dealing with special needs students. The issue, in my view, is how do we provide mental health services to all Albertans, and in this case, young Albertans. And as we approach that larger issue, it becomes very apparent that the important role that has to be played by the school in meeting the need. Obviously, a lot of our students, not all of them, regrettably, are in the school setting, and hopefully through the coordination of effort amongst the several departments who have participated in the mental health policy for Alberta, we will be able to better integrate the services into the school and ensure that we're meeting the needs of young Albertans.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. My supplementary question relates to my constituency and the good work that is going on there in improving treatment of mental illness and the integration of this treatment program with community care. My question to the Minister, will the implementation of this policy recognize the identified continuing need for modern health care treatment centres specializing in mental health care?
Mr. Speaker, the delivery of mental health services is no different in the mental health field than it is in the physical health or long-term care field. And really what it is not about an either-or of institution or community. Rather, what it's about is providing a balance of service. Spectrums are not red and purple. Spectrums are all the colors of the rainbow, and that was the goal and the desire of the Premier's Commission on the Future of Healthcare for Albertans. Certainly the focus of the new policy direction is towards the community, but not towards the community absolutely. We will still have need for inpatient services, and in fact what the paper points to is an enhanced role of the institutions in the continuum rather than a standalone role, which is really the old model of dealing with mental health needs.
A member for Edmonton Kingsway.
My question is to the Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs. When the Premier returned from the recent First Ministers' Conference, he indicated that his government wanted to be fully involved in the North American Free Trade Agreement talks. Albertans, Mr. Speaker, are deeply concerned about the possible impact of a Mexico free trade deal because of the effect of Mexico's low wages and poorly enforced environmental laws. They know that this country has already lost over 400,000 jobs as a result of the Mulroney trade deal. My question to the Minister is this: knowing that the Canada-U.S. trade deal has meant disaster for the workers of this country, will the Minister refuse to support a deal with Mexico that subjects workers and industry in this country to even more unfair competition?
Mr. Speaker, as usual, the honourable member for Kingsway has larded his question with a great deal of political rhetoric. The fact of the matter is that under the free trade agreement between Canada and the United States, in the first 2 years of operation of that agreement, Alberta exports to the United States increased 29%.
Right. There you are. There you are.
And that created, Mr. Speaker, hundreds of jobs for Albertans. And they don't like the facts over there, Mr. Speaker, and as soon as the facts come out, the crows start cawing. Well, here we've heard it again today. Of course, Mr. Speaker, our government, having been participating with the federal government and the other provinces in discussions about the North American Free Trade Agreement, will take all due diligence to make sure that Alberta jobs, Alberta export opportunities are enhanced as a result of any free trade agreement entered into. But there's no doubt at all that the prosperity of this province depends upon increasing our trade, and those people who think we can produce only for domestic consumption would lead Alberta back to the days of the 1890s, and we want to look ahead to the year 2000, not backwards, and that's what we want to see happen in Alberta.
Sure, Mr. Speaker, we've increased our gas sales, but we got less money out of it. That's why the Treasurer's budget's in trouble. In fact, the draft agreement of the North American Free Trade Deal that was leaked last week indicates that the federal government is already willing to agree to little or no restriction on importation into Canada of goods processed or assembled in Mexico. Now, given that workers in Mexican industries earn an average of $2.18 an hour, sometimes as low as 59 cents an hour, will the minister undertake to make it clear to his federal counterpart that Albertans don't want an agreement that does not include a commitment from Mexico to raise their wages and improve working standards?
Prosperity can never come about if they are kept under the state-controlled regime that previously existed, one which would have been heartily endorsed by the people in the Democratic Party in this House. The only way Mexico can bring its standard of living up is to trade its commodities and products with the rest of the world, and I encourage Mexico on their new path of open, market-oriented economy. And I applaud their activity in entering into these discussions, joining the GATT, joining the world, and casting off the shackles of socialism.
Order, please. Order, please. Before calling orders today, might we revert to the introduction of special guests. Agreed? Opposed? Carried. The honourable member for Edmonton Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure today to introduce to you and to the members of the Assembly 18 visitors from the Alberta Vocational Centre, actually the Winifred Stewart campus located in my riding. They are members of an English as a second language class, and they are accompanied by their teacher, Wendy Uncles. I would request that they stand and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs.
Speaker, I'm delighted to introduce a class, students from different classes from Medicine Hat High School. As you know, it is the furthest point away, at least I live further away from Edmonton than any other MLA, and these students have experienced a long bus ride here on the yellow bus. And interestingly enough, I asked them how they enjoyed the trip, and one young man said, "I'm suffering from bus lag." I've never quite heard that before, but I would like to introduce, in addition to the 23 students, Mr. Ray Scow, Mrs. Lori Latowski, Ms. Rhonda Hunter, and Mr. Harlan Martin. And I would ask that these young people from Medicine Hat please rise and accept the warm welcome of my colleagues.
The honourable member for Rocky Mountain House.
Speaker, on behalf of my colleague, the honourable member from Lacombe, Ron Moore, and myself, I'd like to introduce to you some 23 eager, bright young students from the Eckville Junior Senior High School. They are accompanied today by their teachers, Sean Wagner and Georgina Wagner and Shauna Wagner, and bus driver Harold Burdick. Our guests are seated in the public gallery, and I would now ask them to rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of this House.
Orders of the day.
Questions?
The Honourable Deputy Governor.